I would love to ask a question to the panel. Of all the ICF core competencies, which one is most important? And and the panel looked at each other, and this MCC coach said, I'll answer that question. And he said something that I will never, ever forget. It's imprinted in me somehow. He said, all core competencies are important, but if I had to choose one, I will choose maintains presence.
Welcome to the coaching studio. I'm your host, Lyssa, deHart, and I am thrilled to introduce to you today my guest, Elias Scultori. He's an MCC with the International Coaching Federation, and he is one of those people who is passionate for coaching and leadership, and it's absolutely contagious. I first met Elias through our shared commitment to supporting coaches working on and applying for their PCC credential. And I knew right away I wanted to learn more about him and his work. Elias has worked with leaders in over 40 countries, helping them to weave the coaching approach into their leadership styles. His mission is all about empowering people, whether it's individuals, teams, or entire organizations, to help them find clarity, engage with purpose, and create meaningful and lasting change. But Elias isn't just a coach. He is a storyteller, a deep thinker, and someone with an unshakable commitment to creating spaces that celebrate diversity and inclusion. He also writes about coaching, offering heartfelt, practical advice grounded in his years of experience. And when he's not busy shaping the next generation of coaches and leaders, you might find him exploring his other passions: photography, opera, meditation, or trying out new cuisines. Originally from Brazil, Elias has called the U.S. home for decades and now lives in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, Elias. I'm just super excited to be with you here today. Welcome to the studio.
Oh, Lyssa, thank you so much. That description was so beautiful, and I appreciate your heart, and I appreciate the connection that we have done and that we will continue during this hour.
Yeah. No, and it was definitely one of those moments when I met you. I'm like, ooh, I need to get to know this person better. So I'm so glad we've had that opportunity, and thank you so much for saying yes to being on the show. And I guess I would love to start where I typically start with everybody, which is what really led you to this place where you find yourself now as an MCC coach, doing assessments, mentoring, teaching, training, and also coaching people in the world today.
Well, how many hours do we have now for me to?
Like around one.
Let's see if I can make short this long story here. But to tell you the truth, I'm going to start, from the beginning. This concept of creating space has been with me since I was a kid, since I was very young. But as a teenager, I remember my friends coming and wanting to have a conversation with me and take the moment to reflect and think about this. So this has been a part of who I am from the beginning. I started my professional life because of the opportunities that were given to me when I was growing up in Brazil in the music industry, and I became a professional musician. And when I was 20 years old, or even before I turned 20 years old, I became the principal organist of the largest evangelical church in South America.
Wow!
And in that. It was, music for me. I hated performance. I hated to perform in piano recitals and things like that was not my thing. But I loved making music with people. And music became for me the catalyst or the tool that I was using to create space for connection, create space for growth, to create space for community. And that was a natural thing that happened with me. This is an innate desire that I have. My core values are about connection and growth. And because of the tool that was given to me, right? I'm a kid. I didn't know what was happening here. I utilized that tool naturally to create space for connection and growth. That particular position that I got, because it was such a prominent position there, gave me really international exposure. And then one day I was at home watching TV with my father, and the phone rings, and it was a pastor from a church here in the United States invited me to come to the United States to work for them. And I was 25 years old, and I said, sure, I'm going. And I came to this place, and I knew, because of the growth and I have always been a person of searching for self-awareness and growing and looking inside of myself to grow as an individual. And in that reflection, that self-reflection, parallel to my growth as a professional church musician, I realized that personally, I needed to seek other venues for me to be able to share and to be able to be fully authentic to myself and to who I was. And even though after coming to the United States, I did a master's degree in music, and I got even more deeper into that particular industry, I was already looking for other avenues. And as I was doing my research, I had a little bit of a moment when I worked as a graphic designer in a marketing company in the New York metropolitan area. And I was able to then be exposed to corporate America and working for larger organizations. But I knew that it's not quite graphic design. So I started looking for what else. And I thought that I was going to go for a master's degree in social work. And like you, become a psychotherapist and be able to support individuals that way. But I realized that I did not want to work with mental health. And that was when, in my research, I stumbled upon coaching. What is that? Yeah. And that's when I really got exposed to the industry. I didn't know exactly what it was, but I was lucky enough to get into a coach training program that was very closely associated with the International Coaching Federation. And I went in, and it was, okay, this is my home. This is my place.
Oh, I love that. I had a different journey in that I was at first like, I don't get this coaching thing. And I love hearing when people are like, yes, I was at a solid yes when I found myself here. And so then what was really the impetus to then, I mean, you have talked about growth as one of your important values. And I would assume learning and growth is an element of that kind of individual awareness and growth. So what was it that then drove you towards getting your MCC, this thing of mastery? And I'm just going to stop there. What drove you here?
I think that if you know me, and my students and mentees know this very well, my mother shows up everywhere. Once in a while, my mother was a very simple woman. She had barely elementary school education, but I have to say she was one of the wisest person I've ever met in my life. And my mother used to say to me, like when I was growing up, she wasn't concerned if I was going to become a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or making money or anything. Her message was very clear to me. Do what you want. Do what you feel called to. Make sure that you're the best. And everything is going to follow. So, I was 19 years old, and I got the most prominent position in church music, a very prominent position in church music there in the space that I had, propelled me to come to the United States. I didn't have much time to specialize and be super skilled in graphic design. But then when I moved into coaching, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to invest 100%. This is not something that I just want to go by or have a little bit of skill. I always want to excel in whatever enterprise or or any activity that I put myself in. I guess it's part of my DNA.
Yeah, I'm really hearing that desire and I love what your mother said, it doesn't matter what it is, but find your passion and then put 100%, be the best and really put 100% into it. And so I was looking through some of your articles. You talk about in some of your articles, the idea of creating awareness and the ideas of facilitating awareness with the people that we work with. And that in and of itself, I think, is an evolution, because for many people, as we start off as coaches, we're asking questions in very sort of simple ways, or maybe not simple so much as transactional, like really getting to the solution sort of direction. How do we as coaches, and you do PCC assessments for the ICF, and so how do you see people making that transition from these sort of transactional kinds of questions into the kind of questions that really do facilitate this awareness that I know you write about?
Yeah, that is to me the core of what we do. Yes, we can have a coaching conversation, and there is a particular situation that the client is facing, and the client wants to, figure out what they are going to do in that and move forward from there. And then, sometimes it happens there. But I think that the core for us, and I think that the skill of the coach and what we should aim for is deeper, is sustainable change. If we look at one situation at a time and we just find a solution for that situation, we are always going to come back to the same spot, right? Mm-hmm. If we don't go to what is at the core, what is creating that particular situation, right? What is the origin of that? So that is the power of coaching, is to go beyond the surface. And oftentimes the client is not even aware of that. The client is so focused in that particular moment, right? That particular moment is what is occupying the client's mind. And great, let's go there. And what is beyond that? What is underneath that? What is bringing you to this situation? And that is where transformation really happens. The ability of the coach to go underneath the situation, go below the waterline, be able to support the client into connecting to what is at the core. And then by identifying that, then the client is able to say, oh, this is what's going on here that is affecting this particular situation. And oftentimes many other situations that I am involved in. Let me pay attention to that. Let me take care of that. And therefore, I'm not going to fall in the same pattern over and over again. Next time there is a similar situation, I already have resources for this. That's where transformation happens. And that's the distinction between simple transaction. Transaction always happens, right? But simple transaction into a more transformative aspect of coaching.
Yeah. And what do you think the qualities are for the coach to really make that transition?
I remember, and I tell this story oftentimes, I remember many years ago, I was the co-director of events or whatever, I don't remember the title, for ICF New Jersey, one of ICF chapters. And we had this event for ICF New Jersey, an in-person event. This was way before the pandemic and all of this, we had this event in a hotel, lots of people there. We had a panel of coaches, PCC and MCC coaches. And the panel, we had the event. Towards the end of the event, we opened up for questions from the audience. And this guy asks the question. I would love to ask a question to the panel. Of all the ICF core competencies, which one is most important? And and the panel looked at each other, and this MCC coach said, I'll answer that question. And he said something that I will never, ever forget. It's imprinted in me somehow. He said, all core competencies are important, but if I had to choose one, I will choose maintains presence. Because if I am not present, I cannot do anything else. I cannot listen. I cannot establish a session agreement. I cannot facilitate growth. I cannot evoke awareness. I cannot do anything. If I'm not present, I'm not there.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that this transformational aspect of coaching starts there. What is the quality of my presence? Presence is not just a question of I'm here. Presence comes from within. Presence is this belief that the other is worthy of me to stop my life to be with you. Mm-hmm. Presence is honoring this individual. Presence is letting go of my constructs and being able to be open, be receiving. Presence is about a level of self-assurance, trust, belief, groundedness. It all starts there. When we are present to another individual at that level and, coupled with listening actively, then we are able to see, to receive. And naturally, we are going to respond to that individual. We are going to be able to see there is more here than just these words. What is that about?
Yeah, I love this perspective because I agree with you. How many times if we're trying to do the competencies, like you and I have heard plenty of recordings and people are trying to do the competencies and it becomes a very rote sort of checkbox way of like asking questions versus what you're talking about, which is really sort of twofold in my mind. The first is that we are fully present, putting aside all of our stuff so that we can be fully engaged with the human being that we are in relationship with in this particular moment of time. And then the second piece of that for me is also our capacity to truly hear somebody at a deep level. Quick interruption. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on my channel, for liking and subscribing to the work that I'm doing. It means a great deal to me, and I'm very appreciative of it. I also want to extend an invitation to my monthly Q&As so that you have an opportunity. If you're a coach, it's my treat. Sign up below or follow the link and you can come each month and have an opportunity to get a resource development CCE, as well as participate in a really rich conversation about how we show up as coaches and what we would like to have be playing with in our own work, basically. So you are invited, and thank you for being here. It's funny I've thought of this often through the years, but I think it is fundamental to these sorts of professions, coaching, therapy, honestly, any of the professions that work closely with people to truly hear another human being. And I think there's a real deficit of that in not just our culture. I think it's kind of a global deficit. So not just a U.S. deficit or Western deficit, but I think how many of us go through our lives not feeling heard anyway, right?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I say this, that, yes, competencies. Yes, there are the standards, and they are absolutely foundational for us to operate as a profession, and for us to create real value to our clients. But I feel that the most difficult and the greatest challenge for coaches, and I've been training coaches and mentoring coaches and supervising coaches for so many years, I see that the greatest challenge for coaches is this ability and this courage and this humility to transport our letting go of our stuff, and to transport ourselves to the space of the client. That is perhaps one of the hardest skill for a coach to develop.
Yeah, and I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody on LinkedIn, and it came up, be kind to everyone you meet because you don't know, like everybody's walking a difficult path, right? And so I think there's that place of giving ourselves grace, but I think there's also that place of, like, to your point, setting aside us in the conversation so that we can be fully with the person who's in front of us. I think it's transformative for people to feel heard. Forget about, like, some outcome, right? Like, oh yeah, and now I also have a really lovely presented schedule or some tools, but that we've been fundamentally heard. And you use this language of humility and courage. Can you talk more about how those intersect with this ability to be present?
Yeah. In my coach training program, Prime Coaching Academy, we have like these tenets of coaching. And one of the tenets is coaching is a humbling and courageous act. And the idea that for me to really be able to listen, right? It's courageous because, like, how in the world do I go to a coaching conversation not knowing? Like, I don't know what the client is going to bring to me. I don't know I don't know what is the answer to the client's question. I have no idea, right? So this idea that I don't know and I'm going to put myself there, is courageous, right? And this idea that I am going to allow myself, I'm going to put myself to the side here, and I'm going to put the spotlight on this individual. It's a courageous act. And it's also humbling because I don't know. I don't need to know. I don't have to have the answer. Right. And actually, even with the 20 PhDs that I may have on my wall and 150 years of experience that I may have in that particular situation, I still don't know, because that particular situation, the experience of my client, is unique. So it's very humbling to be able to have to put ourselves in that space where I'm here for you.
Yeah.
In your process, in the moment.
Yeah. And I'm remembering years ago, somebody came to me and they were like, how do we fix, I was doing couples work at that time. How do we fix our marriage? And I'm like, I got nothing for you on that. I can teach you some skills, but, like, again, I think it's also, as the coaches, we need to have that courage to go in and not know, because what hubris for me to think that I can talk to you and tell you what worked for me is XYZ. If you did that, you'd get what I got, because I have no idea of what your capacity is, what your history is, what your I don't know, places of tenderness are, what your places of capacity are. Like, you could so outshine me and I would be limiting you to me.
Exactly. I love what you said, that limiting to me, right? The idea of not knowing is so powerful, because if I know, the moment, I say this all the time, the moment that I have the answer, it's over. There is no more discussion. I know the answer, finished. So there is one possibility. So if I come to my client with knowing, I am limiting the possibilities for my client. So the not knowing is so powerful, because then the client can create whatever they want to create. The possibilities are infinite.
Right. And we do something I do know is that the things that I generate out of my own brain, I remember longer. Right. So giving that person that we're being present with that opportunity for it to emerge out of their own brain, what a huge gift.
Huge.
Huge gift. Yeah. I love that idea also that it is really a humble and courageous act too, because I think in a world that seems to set, markers of value based on what you can offer, we've often diminished or made smaller the power of this presence, of showing up and being curious, like genuinely being curious on the behalf of the person we're sitting with, but that curiosity coming from that presence that you talked about. I honestly think that is a monumental mindset shift that people have to address, because most of us have grown up trying to climb the whatever the ladder is, so that we can be the best. I'm the expert. I'm the whatever. And we have to really, if I'm hearing you correctly, step back from that.
Well, that's the beauty of coaching. And we say, coaching, the proposition of coaching is a disruptor. And there, it's exactly that idea, right? We are very well educated. I'm going to be even daring in my language here. We are very well domesticated into, into knowing, into having the answer. And, we are very well rewarded, in our careers, in our social connections, that the more I know, the more titles I have, the more, information I have around me that I can, share with the world. Oh, this person must be, great. So we are very well trained to believe that knowing and gathering information is the currency. It's the way for us to interact and to be successful. And then comes coaching and says, hey, what is valuable is not knowing. Ooh, that is a huge paradigm shift. And for us to train that. So I'm not supposed to tell the client what to do. I'm not supposed to share with the client my experience, but my experience is so valuable. And if I don't share that experience with the client, I'm not providing value to the, and to have a mindset shift around that and realize not knowing is even better. That's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. And it's probably something that we don't just struggle with when we come into coaching. I would just say that we probably, it's a lifelong journey as well, because especially, and I don't know about you, but I know for myself, I just recently, I've been getting some mentor coaching, because I wanted to check in with my own work. And I got the feedback. It sounds like you're having a podcast interview. And I love that, because it's such a good awareness that it is like, it's a constant evolution of remembering our presence. It's a constant evolution of checking ourselves. Are we really being present? Are we really being curious on behalf of the thinker or the client in a coaching conversation? Nothing wrong with a podcast conversation. Totally different thing though. I need to be able to differentiate, right? And so I think my big learning in this last month has been, we often talk about, like, I'm taking off my coach hat right now and I'm going to put on my consultation hat, or then I'm going to take off my consultation hat and I'm going to put on my teaching hat. And I think we can really mess up our brains with the fact that those things start to get very muddy. I don't know. As I say this, I saw you laughing. What's showing up for you?
I have in my podcast, Prime Space, space, I have one episode that I talk about. The title of the episode is Hat On and Hat Off. And I talk exactly what you're talking about. That it's such a slippery slope and very, very important for us to be mindful of. I love what you're saying, and thank you for, your commitment to your skills and going through mentor coaching. And this is so beautiful. We all need to do that. We have to remember that we live in this little space between our ears 24/7. And it's so easy for us to believe that everything that comes to surface within this little teeny tiny space is the truth. So for us, it's so important. That's why community, having conversations. So like so appreciate the partnership with you, even in this conversation or in elsewhere, the community of coaches, friends, whatever it is, mentor coaching, coaching supervision. Oh my gosh. It's so important, all of this, for us to get out of this little teeny tiny perspective that we have and be able to see there are other ways. Yeah. There are other ways of seeing at this situation. That's why clients come to us, right? To see situations from different perspectives, to broaden their vision.
Yeah. And we need to be doing that ourselves. I was really, so here's the question that I was thinking about for a keynote. And it was something to the effect of, how many of you have had mentor coaching in the last year for a renewal or for a credential change? And pretty much everybody in the room puts their hand up, right? Like 90% of the people did. And then I said, and how many of you have just had it, not because you need it, but because you're just checking in with your work? And the hands were like it was just a little number of hands. And I think that courage and humility piece that we were talking about a minute ago is how we also continue to develop ourselves, because it is so easy to get out of alignment with what is really useful coaching. And to your point, it's a slippery slope. It's a really slippery slope.
And sometimes I get coaches that come to me and they are preparing for their PCC or they're preparing for their MCC, and okay, so now I need 10 hours of mentor coaching. And then we do the 10 hours of mentor coaching and they are not quite ready yet, right? Because coaching, it's not like, okay, I'm going to flip a switch and now I'm coaching at PCC level. I'm going to flip a switch and now I'm coaching at MCC level. There is time to mature. There is time to grow. Coaching for us coaches, it's a self awareness journey. I believe there is a lot of learning and in reflection so that we can optimize that level of presence that we were talking about earlier. This doesn't happen overnight. This does not happen in 10 hours of mentor coaching. This happens with a constant commitment to growth and development. So I always say, if you are a coach, you need a coach. It's imperative. To me, is an ethical issue.
Honestly, I think it's an ethical issue. I mean, whether it is, and I think, like, I get supervision and I do supervision for a while, and now I'm doing the mentor coaching. They do such different things. And so I think, I mean, even as an MCC, I don't have a credential on the line here. I'm not trying to get a recording for passing some credential assessment, but it was a good reminder to me that even when we're really working on these skills, we're working with people, we're doing assessments, we're training, we're teaching, that we too need to tune our own, going back to the instrument. Like, if this is an instrument, you don't tune it once and expect you're going to play the organ for the rest of your life, right? How often does an organ need to be tuned, right? Or a guitar or a flute. I don't know about flutes, but I mean, even with trombones, that was my instrument. I played the piano, though, a little bit also as a kid. But these things had to have tuning. The trombone needed oil. Like, you couldn't just play it forever. It's a really interesting element to our own self-work as a coach, whether we're at an ACC, a PCC, or an MCC, that mindset of what we ask of those people we work with, that we are also demonstrating it ourselves. And I really so much appreciate your sharing of it is an ethical issue. I would love to hear more about how you see it as an ethical issue. I'm pretty sure I 100% agree with you, but I'd still like to hear it.
Well, it's very simple. How in the world can I go to a client and say, coaching is great, best thing since sliced bread? Coaching is really transformative. Coaching is really wonderful. You should have coach. How can I have that proposition if I don't believe in that for myself? Yeah. Right? That to me already is it's unauthentic, and there is a disconnect in that proposition. So I feel that if we truly believe that coaching is so powerful to the point that we are investing our professional lives in this, I think that we need to first use that for ourselves. It to me that's where the ethical issue is primarily. What about you? I'm curious.
Well, I agree with you. It's so funny. I was watching, there's a new TV show on Max called The Pit. And I have to say, I really am enjoying it. It's by the people who did ER, but there was this one scene, and it's like the nurse says to the doctor, heal thyself. It's like, we all need to remember we are not silos. To your point, we live in these little tiny spaces right here, and our implicit bias is to assume we're doing everything right. And if we don't look past the blindfolds, and the only way I believe to see past the blindfolds is with another person who can see around us.
Exactly. I love that.
And I had another episode with Ebony Smith, and she talks about none of us can read our own labels. And I think that is another great example of that idea, is that we learn in community. And what a coaching relationship is, if I'm hearing you correctly, it is a community that we've created and forged, coach and thinker. And we, as the coach or thought partner, need to show up with courage and humility that we don't know everything and that we're a partner in this. And also be willing to be in the other chair.
Yeah, 100%. This idea that we say in coaching all the time, we coach the person, not the situation, right? And the idea that we coach the who of the client. We use that language all the time in coaching. Well, how can we expect our clients to show up with the who-ness, with who they are, with the person, if we are not showing up with that?
How?
Right? It's not going to work. Therefore, we need to do our work. We need to be on the journey all the time. And it's a journey. It's never over. We are never done in coaching. We are never done. We are always growing. We are always evolving. We're always learning something. The industry is always growing and evolving, and ourselves, we are always growing and evolving. If we are not constantly paying attention to what is happening with the industry, if we're not constantly paying attention to who we are, how we are evolving, we're probably going to be able to ask a good question, and we're probably going to be able to know how to establish a session agreement, and maybe the format of the coaching conversation is pretty. But that transformational aspect that we were talking about, that requires a human being to be in front of a human being and make that connection.
Yeah. I think you wrote about it, the coach as a human to human experience. It is.
100%.
How do you see coaches really, and honestly, this could be to, again, any of the helping professions. How do you see a therapist? How do you see a coach? How do you see somebody who's working with other human beings, ensuring that they are providing the space so that they're how do you, for reflection, for exploration and insights, how do you conceptualize that? Like, what is the work that you're doing that supports you in this human to human connection?
Well, as I said, it's an ongoing commitment that we do. It's a commitment that I had since I was a kid to be the best human being that I can possibly be with the resources that I have today. It's all I can do, but I am committed to that, and I will be committed to that until the last breath. I know this. It's at the core of who I am, and I am constantly seeking that. But I also think that especially for coaches, one thing that is very important is, as I keep saying, coaching is a human to human experience. Mm-hmm. And I say to my students all the time, just the fact that we give the space, and that space that you were talking about, Lyssa, earlier today, that the space, the opportunity for the other to be heard, that in itself is amazing. It's of tremendous value. And I say this, to students that come in my first class of coaching, that if you offer that space, you're already providing value. Now, let's pick up the things that we have researched, that we have learned to optimize that moment even more, right? So that's when the importance for us as coaches to see the standards, the competencies, the markers, the bars, blah, 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 and all of that as tools to support, right? If I always say competencies, skills, and all of that, they are in the supporting role. The principal role is the client. The moment that we are over preoccupied with the competencies, we put the competencies in the principal role, and then we miss the most important, that is the client.
Okay, I want you to stop for a second. Will you say that again? Because I think that is so fundamentally important, what you just shared.
Yeah. So our competencies are there to support the moment that we are with the client. If we are over preoccupied, did I ask the right question? Did I do the session agreement correctly? Am I evoking awareness? If the moment that we are preoccupied with these skills, we are not present. We are present to the competencies. We are not present to the client. So it's not that we are going to forget the competencies, because the competencies are what supports it. Yeah. So the skill and the practice is to have these concepts of the competencies, and I say the concepts of the competencies, ingrained in us in such a way that we don't need to be worried about them. Of course, I'm going to establish a session agreement. Of course, I want to support the client into establishing an outcome for this conversation. Of course, I'm going to ask an open-ended question. Of course, I'm going to support the client into a movement forward, because it makes sense. I'm doing this not because the ICF told so, or because I learned in coach training, but because I understand the why behind it. Then I don't have to simply check the bars or check the markers. I am there present to my client, and these things naturally, organically are going to come.
Yeah. I mean, that is such a important reminder. And to your point, the client is the principal. That is the focus. That is the person the human we are being present with. And to get the competencies into our bones so that we've integrated them at that unconscious capacity of, what is it? Unconscious incompetence. So unconscious competence, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so having them into our bones that way allows us to know them, but not focus on them, to really have our attention focus towards the human being we're in relationship with in that moment.
Yeah, I just one thing more. I can say this, especially for the new coach that is being exposed to these competencies and to these standards that we have. So just like the analogy that I give oftentimes is, learning how to drive a stick shift car. Right. When you start driving that, it's like, oh my gosh, I have the clutch, I have the gear, and I have, and there is I have to look at the rear view mirror, and there is the pedestrian, there are the signals, and there, the signs, and what
Where am I going?
Exactly. So there is that period that we have to, it's a lot to think about. But what happens, right? Like very soon after we start driving and practicing the drive, and all of a sudden we are in the middle of a highway with cars driving at 100 miles per hour, and we are fine. And we are talking with the person next to us. That's where we want to get. And it is the practice that it's going to allow us to arrive at that particular place.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, half the time we now drive where we're not even paying attention.
How did I get here?
How did I get here to the grocery store? I don't know. Yeah, very, very interesting. I know in a lot of your work, you also talk about like the difference between coaching and being that kind of, I don't know, coach approach, for lack of another way of saying it. What do you see as sort of the difference between the coaching and the coach approach when it comes, and this often probably shows up in organizational situations more so, but even as maybe a parent, you may be bringing a coach approach with your kid, but not being their coach. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, the coach approach is a mindset, is this idea that I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to allow the other person to speak. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to create, as Nancy Kline likes to say, the thinking environment. I'm going to, I love Nancy Kline. So, it's this idea that I'm, regardless of the situation with a friend, with a coworker, with the person at the grocery store, I am asking a question. I'm curious. That to me is that the idea of the coach approach. It's not a formalized conversation. It's not a formalized process. But I am utilizing coaching skills in that particular moment. And this can come in a conversation. This can come on and off. And as a leader, I can ask a question, right? Does that mean that leader is being a coach in that particular moment? I'm not sure. I would prefer to say that leader is using the coach approach in that particular moment. Yeah. Coach is formalized. Coaching is when you have a formalized process with the client, you are the professional and you are bringing a specific format and framework of the coaching conversation that has beginning, middle, and end, that follows the standards of the profession, and you are in this process with that particular client. That's, to me, is the distinction between having the coach approach and being the coach.
I like that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just really, I love the idea that one is the profession and you're coming in and you have an agreement that this isn't like you don't just do this with your friends. Like all of a sudden I'm going to be a coach with you, Elias. I'm going to just start coaching you, because we don't have an agreement for that. We have an agreement for something else, but I can take a coach approach and be curious.
And I want to say, I think that this distinction between coaching and the coach approach also helps the coach. So I have a formalized process with this client. Right now in this conversation, am I coaching or am I just using the coach approach? Right?
How do we discern the difference of when we're coaching versus the coach approach?
Because if you are fully embodying coaching, you're going to follow there are standards, there are expectations, you're going to establish a session agreement. There is a mindset. I'm there not to give advice. I'm not there to tell the client what to do. I'm not there to, to guide the person. I'm there to create, to be a coach. If I am in the middle of a coaching session and I am taking the hat off and put the hat on and all of that stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm consulting and I am, telling the client what to do and I'm giving advice and I'm creating, okay, now we're going to do a mindfulness exercise in the middle of the coaching conversation. Then I'm not necessarily coaching in the way I verbalize this. I am having a conversation that utilizes the coach approach.
Got it. And I think this is a really important, especially for those folks going for a credential who are submitting recordings. I think I have a few things I could say about what you submit for recordings, which I'm sure you also have some thoughts about, like, you be careful about what you choose. But I think, like, even at a PCC level and above, bringing in let's do this exercise. Would you like to do a visualization with me real quick? I really feel like that just totally steps out of coaching. And those demonstrations are really tough for me to sit with and assess, because it's so led by the coach in those moments.
And that's what I mentioned in the head on, head off episode of my podcast is, if you have this idea, if something comes up for me that feels like, this client perhaps would benefit from a moment of pause or calmness, something comes up for me there. It's not that it's not that I'm not going to do that. It's how. Oh. So there is a distinction between, let's pause here and close your eyes and let's have a meditation moment, right? That I am leading. I'm telling the client what to do. But I can simply say to the client, if you pause for a second right now, how do you feel? Right. So then I am opening the door for the client. The client goes there how they want to go, if they want to go, and they have an option to do whatever they want to do. But I at least open the door for them. I think that there is a distinction. I say this a lot in that episode. It's not that we don't share information. Sharing information is a part of the competencies. Standard 7.11, right? You coaches share information without attachment, right? So it's not that we don't do it, but there is a distinction between sharing information as a consultant, sharing information as a therapist, sharing information as a mentor, and sharing information as a coach. And that's where coach training, mentoring, supervision comes to help us understand that distinction, so that when we feel compelled to share something, we know how to do it within the coaching mindset, within that respect and that humility that we were talking about.
Yeah, I really agree with you. And I wonder, occasionally I come across somebody who's like, well, I'm going to do this. Like, I've learned this technique. I went to XYZ program and it's the best. And that is going to be a fundamental part of my coaching, but I want my PCC or I want my MCC. And I'm always struck by the fact that maybe people come to you to learn breathing techniques. Like, maybe that's what they came to you for, but then you're not coaching, and that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with the other roles. They're just not 100%. Coaching. They're
Well,
just
and that's why, in the coaching and the coach approach, I think that it's important for us to understand what is coaching. What is it that we are talking about coaching? Coaching is like it's a fad word. Everybody is a coach, right?
yeah.
And then it becomes like people are doing all different kinds of things, and they are still calling themselves coaches. Well, the community has come together, and we have standardized, and we have said, hey, coaching means this and this and this. So if you need to teach people how to meditate, or if you need to teach people how to lead an organization, or whatever is the knowledge and the brilliant program that you went to. So call yourself that. You are a mentor. You are a consultant. Now we are going to have mentoring, and call that activity by the label that it belongs to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this sort of leads seamlessly into another question that I have for you, which is sort of the evolving definition of coaching. And given the evolving nature of coaching in and of itself over the last few years and into the future, what is your sort of, like, if you were to sort of futurize a little bit, what's on your radar?
No, thank you. Thank you for that. It's fascinating to me, and I was just talking with a couple of coaches this week about this. It's fascinating to me that at the same time that coaching started being formalized as a profession, several other modalities started coming together as well. So positive psychology, motivational interviewing, appreciative inquiry. There are several other modalities that came up. The thinking environment with Nancy Kline. All of these things came to be in parallel. And I hope that in the future of coaching, that we are going to be embracing more of these other modalities, learning from all of these other modalities, so that we can become even more robust as a coach. I love, and it's so foundational, this process that the industry has been in the past decade and a half, specifically towards standardization and creating the standards and the ethical and professional standards for coaching. So crucial for that. And I hope that right now in the industry, the pendulum is all about standards, right? And I hope that we are going to be able to come to a place where we are going to honor these standards and this beautiful work that the community has done, and at the same time, connect even more deeply with these core concepts of presence, of humanity, of connection, of listening, that sometimes when we are so focused on rules and regulations, we miss a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that a lot. So on the podcast, I have a question that was asked by a prior guest, and it is your question. So you don't know who asked it, and they didn't know who they were asking it of. But the question is, what do you find most challenging about coaching?
What do I presently? Well, not presently. I think that the most challenging for every coach is the balancing act. Coaching at its best, I always say this, is a balance between form and flow, technique and artistry, rules and connection. So the combination of these two things being right there in that fine line is a tremendous challenge for all of us. And that's why we need to be always doing mentor coaching, supervision, and growing constantly, because it's very easy for us. And I don't know if we can ever find the sweet spot.
It's sort of a moving target. Like, I mean, even just standing, you're moving, right?
So being in that space and having that reflective practice where we go and we know, oh, maybe I'm leaning a little bit too much over here. Let me try to
I haven't put the hat on yet, but it's getting close.
yes. So being able to be in that space is hard and perhaps the greatest challenge for me.
Yeah, I probably second that as you say it. I'm like, yeah, I 100% agree with that. My final question to you, and I know we talked about Nancy Kline a bit, but what other like people or books or philosophies have really impacted you on your personal and professional growth arc?
So professional, I was thinking about that question because you gave me that before. And I have to say, especially at this point, because I was working on Nancy Kline's book, and I have to say that she has been a tremendous impact for me, not simply because of the concept that she has in the book. Like even today, I went to let me look at the bio of Nancy Kline, and I was reading her bio, and it's like she refuses to talk about, I have this degree or I have this experience and I work for this person. She doesn't talk about that at all. She's talking about her desire to write and to share these. It's so beautiful. So that level, that mentality, that mindset is really transformative. This idea of creating the thinking space, the thinking environment has been tremendous for me.
Yeah, her work is when I mentioned, I wrote an article about this not that long ago and did a video on the thinker or the coach, the coachee and the thinker, and just sort of my perspective on it as a result of her work. And it's been really transformational for me. And for me, just even from a transactional analysis perspective, I don't need to be the expert to their novice, nor do I need to be the novice to their expert. I can be the thought partner to the thinker. And there's something about that just was like, I heard it at the right moment in the right time, and it blew my mind. And I love that that's what you're playing with as well. I think it's just another thing,
Yes.
that is a connection for us. Elias, it was
Oh, Lyssa,
so
thank you.
much fun spending time with you today. I just really appreciate the opportunity to sit with you and have this conversation.
100%. And now you have to come and be a guest at my podcast so that we can play again.
There we go. That's how we'll do it. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.